The evening settles quietly. The rush of the day has passed. The voices of the world grow dim, and the night spreads its calm embrace. This is the hour when the heart longs for rest. Not only for the body, but for the spirit. Stories have a way of soothing the soul. They carry us into places where truth is whispered gently, where hope is rekindled, where peace unfolds slowly like the fading of light into twilight. And among the stories that Jesus told, few shine more brightly with comfort and grace than the parable of the prodigal son. It is a story not only of a wayward child, but of a waiting father. Not only of a wandering heart, but of a love that refuses to let go. It is a story of leaving and returning, of brokenness and healing, of rebellion met by mercy, and despair transformed by forgiveness. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, let this story guide you into calm. Let its gentle rhythm carry away the noise of the day. Let its truth settle deeply, reminding you that no matter how far the journey, no matter how heavy the burden, there is always a home in the love of God. Imagine yourself stepping into this story. A countryside quiet with fields stretching wide. A home filled with warmth, laughter, and light. A father watching over his household with patience and love. Sons living beneath his care, each walking their own path. The air is peaceful. The land fruitful. The household secure. And yet within this peace, a choice will be made. A choice that carries one son far from home. A choice that will one day lead him into sorrow. And then, by grace, into restoration. As the story unfolds, allow your heart to rest in its rhythm. Each step carries you closer to understanding the boundless mercy of God. Each moment whispers the truth that forgiveness is greater than failure. That love is stronger than wandering. That rest is found not in striving, but in returning. Proverbs speaks softly to this same truth. The Lord's unfailing love surrounds the one who trusts in him. Tonight, let that unfailing love surround you as well. A blanket of peace over your thoughts. A shelter for your soul. A gentle hand leading you into rest. The parable begins not with judgment, but with a household. A father and his sons. A picture of life before the wandering begins. For even in the calmest seasons, choices are forming, desires are stirring, and journeys are waiting to unfold. And so we enter this story slowly, letting its peace prepare us, letting its promise remind us, letting its hope draw us into rest. This is the gentle welcome, the doorway into the parable of forgiveness and rest. A story that begins in peace, journeys through brokenness, and returns in mercy. The story begins not in chaos, but in order. Not in famine, but in plenty. Not in sorrow, but in peace. A father lives with his two sons, his household steady, his land fruitful, his home filled with care. This father is no ordinary figure. In his patience, his generosity, and his love, he reflects the heart of God himself. The household is more than walls and fields. It is a place of belonging, of nurture, of security. A place where sons need not fear hunger, nor doubt their worth. Imagine the land around this home. Fields of grain swaying softly in the breeze. Olive trees heavy with fruit. Animals grazing peacefully. Servants working faithfully, honoring the Father's leadership. It is a picture of abundance, of stability, of blessing. Within this home, both sons find shelter. The elder son, diligent and steady, laboring in the fields. His days ordered by responsibility, his heart fixed on duty. The younger son, restless in spirit, yet still under the covering of his father's care. Both dwell in safety, both share in abundance, both are loved without measure. But peace does not always satisfy the restless heart. Even in abundance, desire can stir. Even in safety, longing can arise. The younger son will soon feel this pull. The quiet discontent that whispers of freedom elsewhere. Yet before his journey unfolds, pause and dwell in the beauty of the Father's household. For this is where the story begins. The Father's love is steady. His home is strong. His care is constant. His provision unending. Proverbs reminds us, the blessing of the Lord brings wealth, without painful toil for it. Oi! This home is a picture of that blessing. A place where labor is fruitful, rest is secure, and joy is present. Imagine yourself tonight within this household. The Father's presence steady and kind. His home a place of rest, his fields a place of abundance. You are surrounded by care, by peace, by provision. This is where the parable opens. In the goodness of a father's love. In the strength of his household. In the safety of belonging. Soon the younger son will step away. Soon choices will be made that lead to distance and despair. But for now, let the heart rest in this place of peace. For the story of forgiveness begins in the safety of love. This is the Father's household. Strong, steady, abundant. The place of belonging that never ceases to be home. Morning light touched the fields surrounding the Father's house. Dew clung to the grass like pearls. Birds traced soft arcs upon the air. Servants moved with unhurried purpose, and the elder son's steady footsteps could be heard along the familiar path between barn and vineyard. Within this rhythm of ordinary grace, a smaller rhythm stirred, quiet at first, then insistent. A longing that had been growing in the younger son's heart. He had known the comfort of this home. He had eaten the bread baked in its ovens. He had laughed in its courtyard, run its lanes as a child, and rested under its shade when summer pressed heavy. Yet as seasons turned, a restlessness grew. Not a simple curiosity, but a deep ache for a life imagined elsewhere. He pictured distant cities with bright markets and music that flowed long into night. He pictured friends he had not yet met, doors he had not yet opened, roads he had not yet walked. The thought of boundaries felt like a fence he longed to climb, even though the fence had always kept him safe. Desire, when untended, becomes a script. It repeats itself until action seems inevitable. The younger son allowed this story to grow within him. Freedom without limits. Wealth without labor. Joy without responsibility. He looked at his father's house and, for the first time, saw it through the haze of discontent. Rules felt heavy. Routines felt dull. Love felt ordinary because it had always been there. One morning, while the elder son weighed grain and servants checked harness and plough, the younger son stepped into the cool shade of the main room. His hands were steady, but his chest stirred with a storm of thoughts he could not quiet. He asked for what few children would dare to request. He desired a share of the inheritance while his father was still alive. He sought, in a single stroke, the coins of tomorrow for pleasures of today. There are requests that reveal the heart more than words intend. To ask for the portion early was to say that presence mattered less than property. That the relationship felt lighter than the reward. Yet the father, who knew the contours of both sons' souls, listened without anger's sharp edges. Mercy shaped his silence. Wisdom tempered his grief. Love, steadfast and patient, stood at the center like an unmoving pillar amidst the shifting winds. He divided the estate. Fields were measured. Herds counted. Silver weighed. Deeds carefully recorded. Servants watched in quiet wonder as boundaries of familiar land were redrawn. The elder son received his portion according to custom. The younger son gathered his. Coins clinked into leather pouches. A sound both bright and heavy. The younger son felt the weight on his belt and mistook it for strength. The promise of purchase felt like power. Each bag spoke to him of choices wide as the roads he longed to take. He believed that the resources of the father's house could fund a life without the father's heart. The father did not protest with force. He did not bolt the gate nor bind the boy with chains of shame. He understood that coercion is not the companion of true love. He knew that hearts must return by their own turning, not by the push of a locked door. So he permitted what pained him. He allowed the request to ripen into departure. And in doing so, he honored both love and freedom. The house grew quieter as preparations were made. A new cloak was folded. A staff chosen. A waterskin filled. Sandals tested across the packed earth of the courtyard. The younger son traced goodbye with glances more than words. The elder son's eyes held a mixture of confusion and unspoken questions. Between them stretched a road neither had yet walked, one in duty and the other in desire. When the morning of leaving arrived, the sun rose the same way it always had. Light poured down the old stone steps and came to rest upon the threshold. The father stood within that light. Not blocking the way, not chasing dreams, not cursing the road. Simply standing, heart open, gaze steady. The younger son stepped forward with a breath that trembled and a will that would not bend. He turned his face toward the unknown, and the gate, familiar as breath, opened to let him pass. distance is measured in more than miles. It is measured in the drift of affection, the quiet cooling of gratitude, the choice to hold resources rather than relationships. With each step the younger son took, the house grew smaller behind him. Yet though walls and fields receded, a father's love did not. Love can stand at the farthest horizon without moving its feet. It waits without sleep. It watches without blinking. It hopes without exhaustion. The road soon erased the sounds of home. The bleat of sheep softened into memory. The rustle of olive leaves became a myth. The steady song of orderly labor faded beneath the hum of a world wider than he had known. His pouches were heavy. His hopes were higher still. Independence tasted sweet like the first bite of fruit. The younger son's heart, lit with the fire of desire, mistook the glow for guidance. To the traveler freshly free, cities are bright and strangers kind. Money can turn doors on their hinges and draw chairs out from crowded tables. The younger son imagined such scenes and walked faster. He rehearsed stories for new companions who would not know the gentle shape of his father's patience or the constant strength of his brother's hands. He planned how he would spend, and in the planning he already spent more. Yet even as he hastened, the father in his house moved more slowly. He prayed with the simplicity that only grief can teach. He touched the doorframe with fingertips that remembered his child's small height years ago. He looked down the road not with the hunger of control, but with the hunger of love. He did not chase, for love that chases too closely is often confused with fear. He did not condemn, for love that condemns in absence rarely converts in return. He simply held the steady place where mercy would one day be easiest to find. The elder son returned to the fields, shouldered more work, and bent to his tasks with the precision of habit. Duty is a faithful companion, but without delight, duty grows brittle. In his faithfulness, seeds of quiet resentment settled like dust on a windowsill. Not yet noticed, but present. He watched the now emptied quarters of his younger brother and answered absence with more effort. In another story he might have followed, but in this one, he remained. The household continued to breathe, though one chamber of its heart beat in a far country. Proverbs offers a soft caution that seems written for such a day. An inheritance quickly gained at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. Wealth without wisdom is a river without banks. It spreads wide, shining for a moment, and then vanishes into thirsty ground. The younger son did not yet know this truth by touch. He held coins and thought them covenant. He saw open doors and mistook them for destiny. The request had been granted. The journey had begun. What seemed like a petition for resources was, in truth, a confession of desire. He wanted the benefits of the Father's generosity without the boundary of the Father's presence. He longed for the fruit of belonging while stepping away from the tree that bore it. Such longing always unwinds. It begins with bright mornings and ends, if not turned, in evenings heavy with dust and hunger. Still, the story keeps its pace gentle. It does not rush to the famine ahead. It lingers here, where choices feel clean and consequences distant. It listens to the younger son's footsteps as they press patterns into new roads. It watches the father resume quiet work while keeping one eye on the horizon. It lets the elder son take longer routes through the fields, as if distance within could counter distance without. The younger son reached the edge of the country he had once traced only in imagination. Markets opened like painted fans. Scents of spice and oil tangled in the air. Laughter spilled from doorways framed with colored cloth. Music braided the hours into long strands of celebration. The weight at his belt grew smaller as the crowd around him grew larger. Companionship is easy to purchase while a purse is full. He learned names swiftly and forgot them as quickly when the wine changed hands. Nights melted into mornings without the honest boundary of labor. Back at the house, dawn still broke the way it always had. The father's table set with bread and olives. The elder son's hands stained with grape and earth. The servants humming the songs of old seasons. The sameness, to some, might have seemed dull. To a wiser heart, it was shelter. The father understood this. He allowed the house to remain itself so that when a certain pair of weary feet returned, nothing of the path home would be strange. The request, then, was not only a moment, it was a door. The younger son walked through it into the wide room of his desire. The father remained near another door, the door of welcome he would not close. And the elder son stood somewhere between, faithful yet quietly unsure why the ache in his chest did not yield to his diligence. There is a mercy hidden even in misguided requests. Sometimes what is granted allows the heart to travel to the end of its own promise and discover the emptiness it did not anticipate. The father did not delight in that emptiness, yet he trusted that truth, when it meets hunger, can become a teacher. Love, when it meets surrender, can become a homecoming. The evening of that first day away, the younger son watched the sun dissolve behind roofs and towers. He felt a thrill he mistook for peace. He believed the far country would always feel like the first hour of arrival. He did not yet know that the rhythm of spending eventually outruns the rhythm of earning. That the applause of companions is often timed to the sound of opened purses. That the music of indulgence has a way of growing louder to hide the quiet voice of loneliness. The father, under the same sun, stood at the edge of his land and let the light fade upon his face. He did not rehearse speeches nor compose punishments. He practiced the posture of waiting, which is love's fiercest discipline and its gentlest art. He entrusted his grief to God and his son to the road that would, by mystery and mercy, one day turn back toward home. And so the part of the story that begins with a request closes with three figures set upon their paths. A younger son eager and untested. An elder son faithful and unsettled. A father steadfast and watchful. The house holds its breath. The fields continue to wave. The road hums with possibilities that will soon grow heavy with consequence. For now, the night is mild, the lamps in the far city burn, and the coins still clink with promise. But promises not anchored in presence are like stars reflected in a puddle. They shine for a moment and vanish at the first touch of wind. The younger son will learn this under a sky that looks the same in every country, and the father will keep his vigil under that same sky, trusting that the one who numbers stars can also number steps and bring wandering hearts home. This is the son's request. Bold, revealing, and deeply human. It opens the gate to the journey ahead, where the illusion of freedom will thin, and the mercy of the Father will prove wider than any road the heart can take. The morning of departure came quietly. The younger son's belongings were gathered, coins tucked into a pouch, a staff gripped in his hand, sandals strapped for a road far longer than he imagined. The familiar walls of his father's house glowed in the soft light, yet his eyes were fixed beyond them. For when the heart longs for the horizon, the comforts of home can feel like chains. Servants whispered as he passed, their hands still busy with the daily tasks of baking, mending, and tending. The elder brother labored in the fields, each strike of the hoe against the soil steady and sure. He noticed the absence, though no words were exchanged. In silence, he bore the weight of responsibility, filling the gap left by his brother's choice. The father stood in the courtyard, his face calm, yet his eyes deep with a grief that did not spill into words. He did not command the son to stay. He did not clutch the cloak or the pouch of coins. Love cannot be forced, and freedom must be given. So he released him, though each step cut into his heart like stone. The younger son walked through the gate. A gate that had welcomed him countless times before, but now seemed both final and fragile. Behind him lay the sound of home, footsteps on stone, the bleat of sheep, the laughter of children, the low hum of servants singing as they worked. Ahead of him lay only the unknown. The road was wide at first, lined with olive trees and dotted with travelers moving between villages. Each step away from home felt like stepping into a story of his own making. He told himself he was no longer bound by his father's rules, no longer confined by familiar rhythms. He believed freedom was his to define, and destiny his to command. Yet even in his excitement, traces of unease brushed against him. He felt the weight of his father's gaze lingering behind. He remembered the quiet look in his elder brother's eyes. He tried to silence the memories by quickening his pace, but love has a way of following, even when forgotten. As the road stretched on, the scenery shifted. Villages gave way to open fields, fields to wilderness, wilderness to distant cities where stone walls rose high and markets thrived with noise and color. The younger son felt the thrill of arrival. Here was the world he had long imagined, bright, unbounded, alive with possibilities. Coins jingled at his belt, and for a time, that sound drowned out the quiet tug of home. He spent freely. Food and wine flowed, companions multiplied, laughter filled the nights. The city welcomed him not because of who he was, but because of what he carried. His father's wealth opened doors, and he mistook the welcome for love. But the parable does not linger forever in false joy. It lets the younger son savor his illusion only briefly before turning toward the slow unraveling. For leaving home was not simply walking away from fields and walls. It was stepping out from under the covering of love. And in time, Every road without love reveals its emptiness. Still, the father remained. Not pacing in panic, but standing with patience. His heart was a compass always pointing toward the returning road. His love stretched farther than his son could walk. Proverbs whispers into this moment, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." Oi. The younger son thought the road of independence was freedom, but he would soon discover that freedom without the father's presence is only another kind of bondage. Imagine yourself tonight at that moment of departure. The weight of the pouch heavy, the gate closing softly behind. The thrill of the unknown mingled with the ache of what was left behind. This is the moment of leaving home. Bold, eager, restless, and yet fragile. For though the son had turned his back, the father's love had not. Though he left the safety of the household, the memory of mercy followed him like a shadow. Though the distance grew with every step, the hope of return remained. Leaving home is the beginning of wandering. But it is also the beginning of grace's greater story. This is the leaving. The step away, the journey outward. Soon the bright illusions will fade, and the weight of choice will fall heavy. But still the father waits. And love does not end at the gate. At first, the younger son believed he had found what his soul had long desired. The open road behind him, the city before him, and wealth at his disposal. The clink of coins at his belt seemed to sing a melody of independence. Each step was lighter than the one before, as though he had shed not only the boundaries of home but the weight of obedience itself. He wandered into crowded streets where merchants called out their wares. Spices fragrant with heat. Fabrics bright with dye. Music from flutes and drums weaving through the air. The son inhaled deeply, and the world seemed new. His pouch opened easily. Coins exchanged hands swiftly. And each purchase promised joy. New companions gathered around him quickly. Strangers became friends with the ease of wine poured into cups. Laughter echoed louder when the younger son paid for the feast. Tables filled with food he had never tasted before. Roasted meats, sweet cakes dripping with honey, wines flowing rich and red. Each night seemed endless, each morning a continuation of celebration. Freedom, it seemed, had finally arrived. No father's watchful eye. No brother's steady labor. No boundaries of duty or discipline. The world lay open, and he could shape his own story. But freedom without guidance is like a ship without a rudder. It moves swiftly but aimlessly. It thrills in speed but does not see the rocks ahead. The younger son mistook indulgence for liberty. He thought the applause of his new friends was proof of belonging. He mistook the glow of the city lights for the warmth of love. For a season, the illusion held. His purse grew lighter, but his confidence remained high. He told himself there would always be more. He convinced himself the father's portion was enough for a lifetime. He believed joy could be purchased and peace could be poured from a cup. Yet every night ended the same way. Laughter faded into silence. Songs dissolved into echoes. And when the companions departed, the younger son lay awake in a strange room, staring at the ceiling, feeling a quiet hollowness he did not name. Still, he silenced the ache with more distraction. More feasts, more laughter, more noise. He was determined not to listen to the quiet voice within that whispered of home. Of a father who loved him. Of a household where peace did not depend on possessions. Freedom without love always grows heavy. For what feels like liberty in the beginning often becomes emptiness in the end. Proverbs reminds us, the wealth of the wise is their crown, but the folly of fools yields folly. The younger son's wealth, untethered from wisdom, became not a crown but a chain. Each coin spent without thought was another link in that chain, tightening quietly, unnoticed until too late. Imagine him walking through the city's gates each morning. Crowds pressing close, vendors beckoning, friends calling his name. To others, he appeared alive with joy. But inside, the hollowness deepened. The illusion still glittered, but the shine began to thin. For joy built on coins fades when the purse grows empty. Companionship built on spending disappears when the gifts run dry. And peace built on indulgence always turns to restlessness once the night is over. Still, he pressed on. Certain that one more feast, one more song, one more night of laughter would finally satisfy the ache. He was free, after all. Free to choose, free to spend, free to live without restraint. But freedom without wisdom is often only another path into bondage. And soon, the bright illusion would give way to the harsh reality of famine. The city's laughter would fade, the friends would scatter, and the younger son would learn that the kind of freedom he chased was no freedom at all. This is the illusion of freedom. Shining bright in the beginning, but fragile as glass. For true freedom is not found in indulgence, but in love. Not in running away, but in belonging. Not in spending, but in being held by the one who never lets go. Seasons change quietly, often unnoticed until the world feels different. The city that once rang with laughter grew strangely silent. The markets once overflowing with bread and oil now stood bare. The familiar scent of roasted grain was replaced with the emptiness of hunger. A famine had crept into the land. The younger son, who once walked proudly through crowded streets, felt the change before he admitted it. His purse grew lighter, his companions fewer. The feasts ended, the laughter faded, and doors that once opened at the sound of coins now closed before he could knock. Famine does not only strip the land. It strips the illusions of the heart. Where once he felt strong, he now felt weak. Where once he felt rich, he now felt poor. The independence that once tasted sweet now felt bitter. For when hunger arrives, freedom without provision becomes a heavy chain. The younger son searched for work, but the famine had touched every household. Fields lay barren, vineyards dry, barns empty. Each farmer shook his head with weary eyes. No grain to harvest, no wages to pay, no bread to share. At last, a citizen of the land, hardened by necessity, offered him work. Not in fields of grain or vines of olive, but in pens where swine rooted through the dirt. To a son of Israel, this was not only labor but humiliation. For swine were unclean, despised, a symbol of all that lay far from the holiness of home. Yet hunger has a way of breaking pride. He accepted the task, though shame burned within him. Day after day, he slopped through mud, carrying buckets of husks and refuse, watching pigs devour what he longed to taste. His stomach hollowed. His strength drained. He bent low to scatter food he himself was denied. There, in the stench and filth, the illusions of freedom finally shattered. The laughter of former companions no longer echoed in his ears. The feasts were but distant memory. The joy he thought was love revealed itself as emptiness. Proverbs speaks into this moment. The backslider in heart will be filled with his own ways, but a good man will be satisfied from above. The younger son had been filled with his own ways. And now those ways left him starving. Imagine him crouched in the pen. His hands stained with mud, his clothes torn, his body weak. He glanced at the pods, wishing he could eat what the pigs devoured, yet even that was denied him. He was not simply poor in coin. He was poor in dignity, in spirit, in hope. And yet, in the depth of this hunger, a new kind of hunger stirred. Not for food, but for home. Not for indulgence, but for belonging. Not for freedom, but for forgiveness. Famine has a way of teaching what feasts never can. It strips away pretense until truth stands bare. And here, in the silence of his empty stomach, the younger son began to remember. He remembered his father's house, where even servants ate their fill. He remembered the bread baked fresh each morning, the oil poured generously upon the table. He remembered the kindness of the one he had left behind. The famine that starved his body awakened his soul. He was not yet ready to rise. But the seed of return had been planted. And in time, hunger would grow into humility, and humility into repentance. This is the famine. Harsh, unrelenting, yet strangely merciful. For though it brought emptiness, it also opened the way for fullness. Though it stripped away illusions, it cleared the path for truth. The famine arrives not as the end of the story, but as the turning point. For when all else fails, the memory of love remains. And love has a way of calling even the farthest wanderer home. The famine deepened. And with it, the younger son's desperation. Once he had feasted in bright halls, his cup overflowing with wine and his table laden with delicacies. Now he walked among shadows, his hands empty, his lips dry, his stomach hollow. Work came at last, but not the kind he had once imagined for himself. No vineyards bursting with grapes, no fields filled with grain. The only labor offered was among swine. Animals despised by his people, unclean to their law, a symbol of everything far from the holy life he had known. Yet hunger silences pride. And so he bent low, taking the job, carrying buckets of husks into pens filled with filth. Day after day, he trudged through the mire. His sandals caked with mud, his clothes torn and stained, his skin carrying the odor of animals that lived better than he did. He poured out food for pigs, pods rough and bitter, roots dug from soil, and as he watched them eat, a cruel longing grew in him. He wished he might fill his own stomach with the same food. But even this was withheld. There, among the swine, he faced the full weight of his choices. The inheritance once heavy at his belt was gone. The companions who had praised him when coins jingled were nowhere to be found. The illusions of freedom lay shattered like broken pottery. What remained was silence, filth, and hunger. Feeding the swine was more than a task. It was a mirror, showing him what life becomes when desire runs unguarded, when freedom is severed from wisdom, when love is traded for indulgence. Proverbs speaks into such moments. A man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. The younger son had sought his own way. And now, in isolation, he reaped the fruit of his rebellion. He had raged against wisdom, and now wisdom's absence left him starving. Imagine him kneeling in the pen, his fingers brushing the rough surface of a pod, his eyes stinging with shame. He remembered his father's table, where even the servants had bread enough and to spare. He remembered the mornings when work was steady but joy accompanied it. He remembered the peace of belonging. In the filth of the swine pen, memory became mercy. For sometimes the lowest place is where the first steps of return are born. Feeding the swine stripped him of illusions. It taught him that wealth without love is emptiness. That freedom without guidance is bondage. That companionship bought with coins vanishes when the purse runs dry. It showed him that even the lowest servant in his father's house was richer than he in his far country. Still, this part of the story lingers. It does not rush to his decision. It lets us see him as he is, hungry, weary, ashamed, humbled. For in this place of brokenness, repentance begins to stir. The pen became a turning point. Not because it held comfort, but because it held truth. And as he bent low among the swine, another hunger rose within him. A hunger not for pods, but for mercy. Not for indulgence, but for home. Not for pride, but for forgiveness. This is feeding the swine. The lowest moment, the place of humiliation, the valley where illusions are stripped away. Yet within it lies the seed of return. For in the filth of failure, the memory of love grows strong. And love will soon draw the son toward the road of home. There, in the mire of the swine pen, the younger son's hunger became unbearable. The gnawing emptiness within him was not just of the stomach, but of the soul. He had pursued freedom, yet found chains. He had sought fullness, yet found famine. He had chased joy, yet discovered sorrow. As he crouched low, watching pigs eat the pods he longed to touch, memory began to stir. Not the glitter of city lights, not the hollow laughter of false friends, but the quiet images of home. He remembered the sound of bread being broken at his father's table. The warm scent of oil poured into clay lamps. The steady rhythm of servants' hands preparing meals. Even the lowest servant in his father's house lived with dignity and fullness. While he, a son, starved among swine. It was in that realization that clarity broke through like dawn after a long night. How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? Oi! The words echoed in his heart, cutting through the fog of despair. Clarity often comes not in moments of triumph, but in valleys of brokenness. When illusions fall away, truth becomes visible. He saw clearly what he had lost, but also what still remained. A father's house. A father's love. A way back. Yet clarity alone is not enough. It must be joined with humility. And so he said to himself, I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Oi! These words were more than a plan, they were a confession. He saw the truth of his failure, and he bowed beneath it. Pride had led him away, but humility would lead him home. Imagine the moment. Kneeling in the dirt, his clothes torn, his body weak, his heart broken. And yet, for the first time in a long time, a spark of hope flickered within him. Hope not in himself, not in wealth, not in freedom misunderstood, but in the mercy of his Father. Proverbs whispers into this turning point. Before destruction the heart of a man is haughty, and before honor is humility. Oi! Humility is the doorway through which honor enters. And the son, bowed low in shame, was about to discover the height of love. A moment of clarity can change a life. It does not erase the past, but it opens the future. It does not undo the wandering, but it points toward the road of return. For the younger son, that moment of clarity was a gift hidden in hunger. A mercy disguised in famine. A light shining even in the filth of a swine pen. He rose slowly, unsteady on his feet, yet steady in his decision. His steps would carry him back, not as a son demanding rights, but as a servant seeking mercy. The journey ahead would be long, the questions many. Would his father receive him? Would he be cast aside? Would the door still open? He did not yet know. But love was already waiting. This is the moment of clarity. Born in brokenness, shaped in humility, carried by hope. It marks the turning point of the story. The beginning of repentance, the first step toward forgiveness, the stirring of rest that only love can give. The younger son rose from the place of swine. His legs trembled from hunger, his clothes clung to him with dust and filth, his body weak. Yet in his heart a decision had been made. The moment of clarity had given birth to action. He would return. Not as a son expecting privilege, but as a servant seeking mercy. The road that once carried him away from home now stretched before him again. Familiar, yet different. When he first walked it, his pouch was heavy with coins and his heart light with pride. Now his hands were empty, his heart heavy with shame. Each step carried the memory of wasted wealth, of squandered love, of choices that could not be undone. The journey back was not only measured in miles. It was measured in humility. For every stride was an admission, I was wrong. I am unworthy. I cannot save myself. This was no longer the journey of a dreamer chasing illusions. It was the walk of a broken man seeking grace. The son began to rehearse the words he would speak. His lips moved quietly as he walked. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Oi. Again and again, he whispered it, as though repetition would make it real. As though practicing humility might prepare him for rejection. The road stretched on. Days blurred into nights. His sandals wore thin, his feet ached with every step. He begged for crumbs along the way, slept under the open sky, and drank from shallow streams. But still he pressed forward. For behind him lay emptiness, and before him lay the faint hope of home. There is a holy weight in journeys like this. For every mile walked in repentance is also a mile walked in hope. He did not know if the Father would receive him. He did not know if the door would open. But still he moved, because love remembered is stronger than pride defeated. Proverbs speaks gently here, the Lord sustains the humble, but casts the wicked to the ground. Oi! The younger son had been cast down, but now in humility he found the strength to rise. Not in his own power, but in the mercy he trusted waited ahead. Imagine the Father's house far on the horizon. Its roofline hidden by distance, its walls blurred by heat. To the son it seemed both near and impossibly far. He longed for it, yet dreaded it. He hoped for it, yet feared it. For love once spurned is never easy to face. Still, he walked. Each footstep became a prayer. Each whispered confession a plea carried on the wind. The road that had once been wide with promise now became narrow with repentance. Yet narrow roads often lead to the richest doors. The journey back is the heart of repentance. It is not instant, it is not easy, it is not without pain. But it is necessary. For repentance is not only turning from what is wrong. It is walking toward what is right. Not only leaving behind shame, but moving toward mercy. The younger son, weary and broken, walked slowly, his eyes fixed on the road. He did not yet see the Father watching. He did not yet know that love had never stopped waiting. He only knew that every step forward was a step closer to hope. And though he did not yet realize it, the hardest part of the journey was already behind him. For the true distance was not measured in miles, but in the turning of the heart. And that turning had already happened, there in the swine pen, when humility was born. This is the journey back. A long road of shame and hope, of confession and courage. the path every soul must walk when it leaves illusion and seeks forgiveness. It is the story of a wanderer returning, and of love waiting just beyond the horizon. Back at the household, the father had not forgotten. Each morning, as dawn broke across the fields, he would step outside and lift his eyes to the horizon. The same road that had carried his son away now stretched endlessly before him. Empty, yet full of promise. The father still tended his land, still oversaw the servants, still shared meals with the elder son. But beneath every action was a quiet ache. Love had not diminished in absence. It had deepened. Though his son was far, the father's heart remained near. Those around him may have urged him to move on, to forget, to accept that the boy was gone. But love does not release so easily. A father's love does not measure distance in miles or failures. It measures only in belonging. And belonging, once given, cannot be erased. So he waited. Not in despair, but in hope. Not with clenched fists, but with open hands. For true love does not build walls to punish, it builds doors to welcome. Each evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows lengthened across the fields, the father's eyes again turned toward the horizon. He could not see his son's face, but he carried it in memory. He could not hear his son's voice, but he replayed it in silence. He could not know the details of the far country, but he knew the nature of mercy, and he trusted that one day mercy would lead the boy home. The elder son labored faithfully, but he too saw the father's gaze linger. And though he said little, the silence between them grew heavy. For love that waits for one can sometimes feel like neglect to another. Yet the father did not cease his watching. For love cannot divide itself, it multiplies. Imagine the father standing at the edge of his land, the breeze stirring his cloak, his eyes fixed upon the distance. To any passerby he might have looked like a man lost in thought. But he was a man anchored in hope. His posture, though weary, carried the strength of love that refuses to give up. Proverbs whispers into this scene, "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry." Oi. Just as God watches for his children, so this father watched for his son. The waiting was not passive, it was prayerful, hopeful, steady. And then, one day, the horizon shifted. A small figure appeared, stumbling, weary, broken. His clothes tattered, his frame thin, his steps slow. From a distance he might have been mistaken for a beggar, but the father's heart recognized him instantly. Love knows its own. Before the son could reach the gate, before words could be spoken, the father's waiting turned into movement. He did not stand still, demanding apology. He ran, breaking the dignity of age, forgetting the decorum of his household. He ran because love moves swiftly when mercy is near. But that moment belongs to the next part. For now, the image lingers, the father watching, day after day, eyes lifted to the horizon, heart open, hope unbroken. This is the father watching. A picture of God himself, who waits for every wandering child, who gazes down every road of return, whose love is never weary of watching, never tired of waiting. The horizon shimmered in the afternoon heat. A figure stumbled along the road, head bowed, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of shame. His clothes were torn, his sandals worn through, his body gaunt from hunger. At first glance he looked like any beggar wandering the dusty path. But the Father knew. Love has an eyesight sharper than distance. It recognizes not the clothing but the child, not the stride but the soul. Though time and sin had altered the younger son's appearance, they had not erased his identity. The father's heart leapt, and in that instant waiting turned into running. The father did not walk with measured dignity. He did not stand still, demanding the son crawl back in apology. He ran. Robes gathered in his hands, feet pounding the earth, dust rising behind him. Each stride carried not reproach but mercy, not judgment but joy. For love, when it sees repentance, rushes to meet it. The son, rehearsing his confession along the road, scarcely had time to speak. He had planned his words carefully. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." Oi! His lips began to form them as the father approached. But before syllables could finish, arms were already around him. The father embraced him. Not cautiously, not reluctantly, but fully. His arms wrapped around the son's wasted frame, pulling him close as though to stitch back what distance had torn apart. He kissed him again and again, not minding the stench of swine upon him, not caring for the dirt upon his skin. For love does not shrink back from filth, it covers it. The son tried to speak. His voice cracked. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father's embrace was louder than words. Mercy interrupted confession, not to silence repentance but to magnify forgiveness. Imagine that moment. The younger son, expecting rejection, finds welcome. Anticipating punishment, he meets compassion. Preparing to kneel as a servant, he is lifted as a son. The servants, who had hurried behind, stood astonished. They had seen many returns, but none like this. For the father ran not as master but as parent, not as judge but as redeemer. Proverbs speaks into this embrace. Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all offenses. Oi! The father's love did not ignore the offense. It covered it, swallowed it, overcame it. Love became larger than failure. Mercy became stronger than shame. The son's ragged clothes could not hide the truth of who he was. He was still the father's child. No amount of wandering, no depth of sin, no filth of labor among swine could erase the bond of love. As the father held him, years of waiting condensed into a single heartbeat. The long nights of watching the horizon found their answer. The prayers whispered in silence met their reply. The distance collapsed. And though the story will soon speak of robes, rings, and feasts, it is here, in the running embrace, that the heart of the parable shines brightest. For before restoration comes, there is recognition. Before the feast is set, there is forgiveness. Before the robe is placed, there are arms around a weary child. This is the running embrace. A picture of God's love for every soul that turns back, however broken, however stained. For when we are still far off, He runs. When shame weighs us down, He lifts. When guilt silences our tongue, His mercy speaks louder. The embrace had spoken more than words could hold. The Father's arms wrapped tightly around the weary Son, and the weight of distance dissolved. Yet the Father's love was not finished with a welcome alone. He would not allow His Son to stand in rags when He belonged in robes. He would not leave Him barefoot in the dust when His steps were meant for dignity. The Father turned to the servants, His voice urgent but filled with joy. "Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on Him. Put a ring on His finger and sandals on His feet." Oi! Each command carried meaning deeper than cloth and leather. The robe was not simply fabric, it was honor. It covered the filth, the shame, the remnants of the far country. The Son had returned broken, but the robe proclaimed restoration. It said to every eye that looked on, "This is my Son, clothed in dignity, restored to His place." The ring, placed upon His finger, was more than ornament. It was a seal of belonging. In ancient households, the ring carried authority, it marked identity, it symbolized family. To wear the Father's ring was to be recognized as son, not servant. Not outsider, but heir. The younger son, who had planned only to beg for servanthood, found himself reinstated as child. And the sandals, simple, yet profound. Servants often went barefoot, but sons wore sandals. To place shoes upon His weary feet was to lift Him out of shame and restore Him to honor. Each step from that moment forward would not be marked by disgrace, but by belonging. Imagine the scene. The Son still trembling, dust clinging to His skin, the odor of swine not yet washed away. Yet upon Him rests the finest robe, a garment fit for celebration. His finger bears the ring of the household. His feet are steadied in new sandals. Tears blur His vision. He had expected rejection, but He was embraced. He had rehearsed words of servitude, but He was restored. He had come home ready to kneel in shame, but He stood clothed in dignity. Proverbs offers a gentle echo, "A faithful man will abound with blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished." Oi! The Son had hastened into riches and reaped famine. But in humility, He found blessings greater than silver. He found the blessing of restoration, the gift of honor freely given. The servants hurried to obey, their hands moving quickly, their eyes wide with wonder. For they knew what this meant. The Father was not simply forgiving, He was restoring. Not simply welcoming, the Father was declaring to the world, "This one was lost, but he is found. This one was dead, but he is alive again." The robe, the ring, the sandals, each was a proclamation. Together they formed a testimony that love not only receives, but renews. Love does not stop at mercy, it moves into restoration. And as the son stood clothed in these signs of belonging, the father's joy overflowed. Yet his joy would not end in clothing or symbols. It would flow into celebration, into music and feasting, into the gathering of the household to rejoice in what had been restored. This is the robe and the ring, the outward sign of an inward truth. That forgiveness is not reluctant, but abundant. That grace does not simply accept, but restores. That love does not only cover the past, but declares a new beginning. The father's voice, rich with joy, rang through the courtyard. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Oi! And so the household stirred into motion. Servants hurried, hands moving with unusual eagerness. A fire was kindled, the choicest calf prepared, tables arranged, lamps lit. The ordinary rhythm of labor gave way to the rhythm of celebration. The younger son, still reeling from the robe upon his shoulders, the ring upon his hand, and the sandals upon his feet, now found himself the center of a feast he could not comprehend. His eyes, still weary from hunger, widened at the abundance laid before him. Meat roasted upon open flames. Bread baked golden in the ovens. Jars of wine poured into cups, their fragrance filling the air. Music rose from the courtyard. Flutes and drums, voices lifted in song. Laughter rang out from every corner, for joy had returned to the household. What was lost had been found. What was broken had been restored. Imagine the scene. A son who only hours before trudged through the dust in rags now sat at a table overflowing with food. He who had once longed for the pods of swine now broke bread in his father's house. He who had rehearsed words of shame now listened to songs of joy. The feast was not only food, it was a proclamation. It declared that love triumphs over failure. That mercy is greater than shame. That restoration is worthy of celebration. The father did not wait for whispered apologies in corners. He declared the joy publicly, gathering the whole household into the song of forgiveness. For when love restores, it does not hide in secrecy, it shines for all to see. Proverbs reminds us, a cheerful heart has a continual feast. Oi! The feast was not only upon the table, it was in the heart of the Father, spilling over into every servant, every guest, every voice that lifted in celebration. The Son, overwhelmed, could scarcely eat. Not because hunger was gone, but because joy was greater. Tears blurred his sight, and every bite of bread tasted like mercy. Every cup lifted felt like grace poured freely. Every sound of laughter reminded him that he was not a servant at the edges, but a son at the center. The servants, who had once whispered at his leaving, now whispered at his return. Their voices carried awe, not scorn. For they saw that the Father's love had not diminished. They saw that mercy had the power to turn famine into feast. They saw that forgiveness had become music and dancing. The fattened calf, long reserved for a day of great celebration, was offered without hesitation. For the Father's joy could not be measured in portions. It required the best, the fullest, the most abundant. Nothing less would honor the miracle of a lost son restored. The night grew long, but the joy did not fade. Lamps glowed warmly, laughter spilled into the streets, music carried on the evening air. The household, once marked by quiet waiting, now pulsed with life renewed. And at the center of it all sat a son who had thought himself unworthy. A son who had prepared to kneel as a servant. A son who now tasted the feast of forgiveness. This is the feast prepared. A table of abundance where shame is swallowed by joy. Where wandering ends in welcome. Where mercy becomes music and love becomes celebration. While music and laughter filled the Father's house, another story unfolded just beyond its walls. The elder brother, who had labored faithfully in the fields, returned at the close of the day. His hands bore the dust of soil, his shoulders carried the weight of long hours beneath the sun. He expected quiet rest, perhaps the familiar evening meal, the steady rhythm of ordinary life. But instead, the air quivered with celebration. He paused along the path, listening. The sound of flutes and drums, the voices of servants in song, the smell of roasted meat drifting into the open fields. Confusion knit his brow. He called to a servant and asked what it meant. The reply struck his heart with the sharpness of surprise. Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound. Oi! In an instant, the elder brother's chest tightened. Anger rose like fire in dry grass. He had labored day after day, never straying, never squandering, never demanding. And yet, no feast had been given for him. No robe, no ring, no celebration. But for this brother, this wanderer who wasted wealth in reckless living, the household overflowed with joy. The elder brother's anger burned not only against his sibling but against the father's mercy. For love that forgives deeply can feel unfair to the one who measures by effort. He stood outside the house, refusing to enter, his arms crossed, his heart heavy with resentment. Imagine the contrast. Within the house, light and laughter. Music and feasting. Joy spilling like wine. Outside the house, shadows deepened. Silence pressed hard. Bitterness coiled tight. The father, hearing of his elder son's anger, did not remain inside. He left the feast and went out to him. Love that runs to meet the prodigal also steps out to meet the resentful. Mercy moves not only toward the broken wanderer but also toward the bitter worker. The elder son spoke with sharpness. Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Oi! His words revealed his heart. He saw himself less as a son, more as a servant. His labor had been steady, but his joy absent. He obeyed, but he did not feel loved. He measured worth by work, not by relationship. And mercy, when poured out on his brother, felt like injustice. proverb speaks into this moment. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Oi! The elder son's envy gnawed at him. His eyes could not see the abundance that had always been his, because they were clouded by comparison. Imagine the father's gentle gaze upon him. Lines of sorrow etched with patience. He did not rebuke harshly. He did not dismiss his feelings. He listened, and then he spoke with words that carried both love and truth. But those words belong to the next part of the story. For now, the scene lingers. A feast within, resentment without. A son restored at the table, a son embittered at the threshold. Both sons loved, both pursued, both invited. This is the elder brother's anger. A reminder that bitterness can blind, and that even those who remain near the Father can miss the joy of His mercy if they measure love only by labor. The courtyard glowed with lamplight. Music and laughter poured through the open doors, but outside, in the cooling night air, stood the elder son. His arms folded, his face shadowed with bitterness. His feet, though strong from labor, would not move toward the feast. The father, hearing of his elder son's anger, left the celebration. He stepped out of the warmth and into the tension, just as earlier he had run down the road to meet the prodigal. Love does not wait behind walls. It seeks, it moves, it draws near. The elder son's voice broke the silence, sharp and heavy. Look. All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Oi! His words spilled out, bitter and raw. Each phrase revealed the burden he carried. He spoke of slavery, not sonship. Of duty, not delight. Of fairness measured by effort, not love measured by grace. But the Father, steady in love, answered not with anger but with gentleness. His words came like a soft stream over stone. Patient, calm, unshaken. My son, the Father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Oi! My son! The words themselves carried tenderness. The elder had spoken harshly, but the father replied with affection, reminding him that he was not servant but child. Not forgotten, but always near. You are always with me. The father did not diminish his faithfulness. He acknowledged it. He cherished it. He reminded him that presence itself was a gift. For what greater honor than to walk daily in the Father's company, to share in His abundance without ever leaving His side? Everything I have is yours. The elder feared he had been overlooked, unrewarded. But the father reminded him that the estate, the fields, the wealth, all of it belonged to him. He had lacked nothing. Yet envy had blinded him, making abundance feel like absence. But we had to celebrate. These words revealed the heart of mercy. Forgiveness is not optional when love is true. Celebration is not extravagance when life has been restored. The Father did not excuse the prodigal's waste, but he declared that restoration is greater than ruin. That mercy is stronger than failure. This brother of yours. The elder had called him this son of yours, trying to distance himself. But the Father corrected gently. This brother of yours. Restored to me, and still bound to you. Forgiveness does not erase family, it restores it. Imagine the Father's hand resting upon the elder son's shoulder. His voice calm, his eyes steady. He did not scold harshly, nor did he dismiss the pain. He spoke truth wrapped in love, reminding him of his place, inviting him into joy, calling him to share in the mercy that had already filled the household. Proverbs whispers into this moment, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Oi! The Father's gentle words became a balm to bitterness. An invitation to lay down envy and step into celebration. The elder son stood at the threshold, the choice before him. To cling to resentment, or to step into joy. To measure love by fairness, or to trust love's mercy. To remain outside, or to join the feast within. And though the parable leaves his choice unspoken, the Father's words remain timeless. They reach not only to the elder son, but to every heart that struggles to rejoice in mercy given to others. This is the Father's gentle words. A picture of God's own patience, reminding us that His love is not divided between His children, but poured out abundantly upon all. Forgiveness stood at the center of the Father's house. It was in His running feet, His open arms, His tears of joy. It was in the robe wrapped around shoulders once clothed in rags. In the ring slipped onto a finger that had squandered wealth. In the sandals tied to feet that had wandered into far places. But forgiveness was not only for the younger son. It also reached for the elder. For mercy is never limited. It does not run dry when poured out on one. It multiplies, flowing into every corner of the household. The younger son had needed forgiveness for rebellion. The elder son needed forgiveness for resentment. One had sinned openly, the other silently. One left home, the other stayed but carried distance in his heart. Yet the Father's love covered both. The heart of forgiveness is not found in ignoring sin. It is found in overcoming it with love. The Father did not pretend the younger son had not wasted his inheritance. He did not deny the pain or cost. But He chose to let mercy speak louder than failure. He chose restoration over retribution, celebration over condemnation. This is the mystery of grace. It does not weigh offenses on scales. It does not calculate worthiness. It simply flows, because love is its source. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is always costly. The Father bore the cost of humiliation, of loss, of pain. Yet He bore it willingly, because love sees the child, not the debt. And love counts the child's return as greater than the sum of their sins. Proverbs points us here. He who covers over an offense promotes love, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. Oi. To cover is not to excuse. It is to shield, to heal, to restore. The Father covered the Son's offense, not by denying it, but by clothing him in new garments. Imagine the younger son at the table, bread in his hands, laughter surrounding him. His heart still heavy with memory, yet lighter with every moment of welcome. Each bite tasted like mercy, each sound of music like grace. He had come home expecting scraps, but he was fed with a feast. He had come expecting rejection, but he was lifted into joy. And imagine the elder son at the threshold. Anger still stirring, yet the Father's words lingering in his ears. My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate. For your brother was dead and is alive again, he was lost and is found. Oi. These words held an invitation. To forgive, to join the feast, to let bitterness go. The heart of forgiveness calls to both sons. To the one who strays far, and to the one who stays near but grows resentful. It reminds them both that love is greater than failure. That mercy is wider than envy. That the Father's house is a place where grace reigns above all. Forgiveness does not erase the past, it redeems it. The wasted inheritance would not return. But the Son had. And that was enough for celebration. In every heart, this story finds its place. For we have all been the younger son at times, wandering into distant places. And we have all been the elder son at times, struggling to rejoice in mercy extended to others. But above both stands the Father, whose love is steadfast, whose mercy is abundant, whose forgiveness is complete. This is the heart of forgiveness. Not reluctant, not partial, not measured by fairness, but overflowing, abundant, and free. It is the love of God Himself, drawing every child home, whether from rebellion or resentment, whether from distance or bitterness. The younger son had wandered far. His feet blistered on unfamiliar roads. His heart burdened with guilt. His body weakened by hunger. But now, seated at his father's table, he discovered a rest deeper than sleep, richer than food. He discovered the rest that forgiveness gives. Rest is not only the stillness of the body. It is the quiet of the soul. And the soul finds its truest quiet not in possessions, not in indulgence, not in escape, but in being known and still loved. The younger son had feared rejection. He had feared that his father's gaze would pierce him with anger, that the household would turn away, that his shame would define him forever. Instead, he was embraced, clothed, fed, restored. The fear that once burned in his chest melted away. In its place came peace. This peace was not fragile. It did not depend on circumstances. It did not rest on whether the inheritance could be restored or the wasted years retrieved. It came from love that sees beyond failure, from mercy that covers shame, from belonging that cannot be undone by wandering. The elder son too was weary, though his weariness came not from wandering, but from labor. Years of toil without celebration, of faithfulness without joy, had left him tired in spirit. He carried not the rags of rebellion, but the heavy cloak of resentment. And resentment is a weight as crushing as famine. To him as well, the Father offered rest. Not in a robe or a ring, but in words gentle and true. My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. Oi. These words were an invitation to lay down envy, to rest not in fairness but in love, to rejoice in mercy freely given, and to find his place not as a servant striving, but as a son belonging. Proverbs whispers into this scene, the fear of the Lord leads to life, then one rests content, untouched by trouble. Oi. Rest is not the absence of labor, nor the absence of hardship. It is the contentment of a heart secure in God's love. Imagine the courtyard that night. Music rising, lamps glowing, laughter echoing against the walls. And in the midst of it, one son clothed in a robe of restoration. Another invited to wear the garment of contentment. Both offered rest. Both invited into joy. Rest for the weary soul is not found in running farther, nor in working harder. It is found in returning, in trusting, in receiving the love that does not fail. The younger son, once lost, discovered it in his father's embrace. The elder son, faithful yet resentful, was offered it in his father's gentle words. And all who hear the story are invited into it. To lay down guilt, to release bitterness, to rest in mercy that never ends. The feast itself became a picture of that rest. For tables heavy with food and hearts filled with joy are not about labor earned, but about love received. And love, when trusted, gives the soul its sweetest rest. This is rest for the weary soul. The kind of rest that comes not from sleep alone, but from being found, forgiven, and embraced. It is the rest Jesus offers when he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Oi. The story of the prodigal son is not only about a household long ago. It is a story that breathes into every heart, in every time, in every place. Its lessons reach across generations, across cultures, across lives weighed down by failure, resentment, or longing. First, it speaks to those who wander. To every soul that has strayed from love, from truth, from God Himself. The younger son's journey reminds us that freedom without guidance quickly becomes bondage. That indulgence without wisdom turns to famine. But most of all, it reminds us that no distance is too great for return. No road is too long, no failure too deep, no shame too heavy. The door of the Father's house remains open, and His love still runs to meet the weary. Second, it speaks to those who remain. To the faithful ones who labor in fields day after day, who obey without leaving, yet whose hearts grow tired and resentful. The elder son's struggle is a mirror to many. For bitterness can grow even in the soil of faithfulness. Envy can creep even into hearts that stay close. But the Father's gentle words call them, 2. Into joy. You are always with me, and everything I have is yours. Oi. The lesson is clear: love is not divided. Mercy given to another does not diminish the love you already have. Third, it speaks of forgiveness itself. Forgiveness is not earned, it is given. Not calculated, it is poured. The Father did not wait for perfection before embracing his Son. He saw repentance, and mercy moved faster than words. The robe, the ring, the sandals, the feast, each was undeserved. But love delights in giving what is undeserved. That is the heart of grace. Fourth, it teaches us about God Himself. For the Father in the story is a picture of the Heavenly Father. A God who waits, who watches the horizon, who runs to meet His children while they are still far off, who embraces before explanations, who restores before restitution, who celebrates before questions. The God who rejoices more over one sinner who repents than over 99 who do not wander. Fifth, it teaches us about ourselves. For in truth, we are both sons. At times we are the younger, restless, reckless, running toward illusions that leave us empty. At times we are the elder, faithful outwardly, yet inwardly heavy with resentment. And at all times, we are in need of the Father's love. We need His embrace, His gentle correction, His feast of mercy. Proverbs points the way: the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in times of calamity. Oi. The younger son fell, but he rose again by grace. The elder son stumbled in bitterness, but the Father's words invited him to rise as well. And so it is with us. Falling is not the end, for love lifts. Imagine your own life within this parable. Perhaps you remember seasons of wandering, when distant places seemed brighter than home. Perhaps you recall times of resentment, when another's blessing felt like your loss. Perhaps you carry shame or envy still. But the Father's invitation remains. Come home. Enter the feast. Rest in mercy. The lessons for today are simple, yet eternal. Love waits. Forgiveness restores. Mercy celebrates. And rest is found not in striving, but in returning. This is the lesson of the parable for every heart today. That God's love is greater than our failures. That His mercy welcomes us not reluctantly, but joyfully. And that His feast is prepared not only for others, but for you. At the center of the parable lies not the failure of the younger son, nor the resentment of the elder, but the unshakable love of the Father. A love that waits with patience. A love that runs with joy. A love that restores with abundance. This love was not diminished by distance. Though the younger son wandered into far places, the Father's love remained steady. Though the elder son stood outside the feast, bitter and resistant, the Father's love stepped out to meet him. One son had broken rules, the other had broken relationship. Yet both were pursued by the same unchanging love. The Father's eternal love is not conditional. It is not based on performance or perfection. It does not rise and fall with success or failure. It remains, like the steady flame of a lamp that never burns out. For the younger son, that love took the form of embrace. A father running down the road, arms open, heart bursting. The love that clothed him, fed him, restored him. A love that saw him filthy and hungry, yet called him son again. For the elder son, that love took the form of gentleness. A father leaving the celebration, standing beside his angry child, speaking truth with patience. Reminding him of his belonging, inviting him into joy. Love that did not rebuke harshly but reached out tenderly. This is the eternal love of God Himself. A love that spans the heavens, that holds the world, that searches the horizon for every wandering child. A love that does not end when we fail, that does not diminish when we grow bitter. A love that is steady, enduring, everlasting. Proverbs offers a reflection. The love of the Lord endures forever, to those who keep His covenant, to those who remember His commands. Human love may falter, but divine love endures without end. Imagine the Father's household in the quiet after the feast. Lamps dimming, music fading, the night settling over fields. Yet even then, the love remained. Not tied to the noise of celebration, nor to the weight of words. But constant, steady, unbroken. Eternal love does not mean every moment is easy. It does not erase consequences, nor deny the pain of choices. But it covers shame with mercy. It calls wanderers home. It opens the feast to the resentful. It holds both sons in its embrace. The story itself leaves us in a holy pause. The younger son restored. The elder son still standing at the threshold. The father's arms open wide to both. The parable ends not with resolution, but with invitation. For the love of the Father is not just for them, it is for all who hear. And so tonight, as the story rests within your heart, let it remind you of this truth. That God's love for you is eternal. It does not fade with distance. It does not crumble with failure. It does not vanish with resentment. It endures, steadfast and strong, calling you to rest, to belong, to come home. This is the Father's eternal love. The love of God Himself, unending, unchanging, unwavering. A love that waits at the horizon, runs down the road, and never ceases to welcome His children back into His embrace. The story draws to its quiet end. The music of the feast has faded. The night sky is dark above the Father's house. Stars shimmer softly, and the air carries the lingering fragrance of bread and roasted meat. The household, once filled with sorrow, now rests in joy. The younger son, once lost, now lies within the safety of home. His body finally nourished, his heart finally at peace. He had wandered far, yet mercy brought him near. He had fallen low, yet love lifted him high. His journey is not remembered for his mistakes, but for the embrace that restored him. The elder son, too, still lingers in our thoughts. His resentment revealed the weight of comparison, the weariness of measuring worth by labor. Yet the father's gentle words reached for him as well. "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." Whether he stepped into the feast or remained outside, the truth of love was unchanged. The father loved them both. And at the center of it all, the father stands. Patient, merciful, steadfast. A picture of God Himself. The God who waits for the wanderer, who runs to meet the repentant, who steps out to calm the resentful. The God whose mercy is greater than sin, whose forgiveness is deeper than shame, whose love is wider than resentment. This story is not only theirs, it is ours. We, too, know the hunger of wandering, the weariness of striving, the bitterness of comparison. And we, too, are invited home. The same Father waits for us. His gaze set on the horizon of our hearts. His arms ready to embrace. His table ready with bread and joy. Proverbs reminds us, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower, the righteous run into it and are safe." To run to God is to find safety. To rest in Him is to discover peace. To trust in His love is to know forgiveness without end. So tonight, let your heart be quiet. Let the restlessness of the day fall away. Let the noise of regret and resentment fade into silence. The Father's love is enough. It is steady, unchanging, eternal. Like the younger son, you are welcomed. Like the elder son, you are reminded of your belonging. And like both sons, you are invited to rest. The story leaves us with an open door. A feast prepared. A father waiting. And the assurance that no matter how far we wander, no matter how heavy our burdens, love is always greater. This is the gentle closing reflection. A reminder that forgiveness is real. That mercy is abundant. That love is eternal. And as you drift into rest, may your soul find peace in the Father's embrace. May you breathe deeply of His mercy. May you rest safely in His love. For the story of the prodigal son is, at its heart, the story of God. And His story is one of welcome, of restoration, of peace. A story that does not end. A story that carries you into rest tonight and hope tomorrow.